The Chief Executive of the Volunteer Firefighters Association, Bill Butzbach, has been suspended while allegations of bullying and harassment are investigated. The complaints relate to incidents from several years ago and will now be the subject of an investigation by Kristy McDonald QC. Her probe comes as Fire and Emergency faces mounting pressure over the way it handles complaints over sexual assault, harassment and bullying. Tony Sartorius is a senior firefighter with 22 years experience. He's the founder of Vollynet, which is the largest online community for volunteer firefighters. And Tony joins me now. Good evening, Tony. What is the feeling out there in the volunteer community around this issue?
Hi, Lisa. Well, I suppose it would be fair to say that everybody wishes it wasn't happening. But I can say that for the several people I know who have had behaviour like this occur to them and have made complaints, there's quite a lot of relief and excitement that finally it's seeing the light of day as an issue and that there's some public interest in getting it sorted out. It feels like progress, feels like momentum.
When you say several people, obviously there are two particular complaints that are being looked at. Do you think it goes way deeper than this?
I think within the organisation overall, yeah, absolutely. You know, there are as the NZPFU have said in the last few days, they have been reached out to by 10 to 12 people, and I think there's probably a lot more than that. You know, some of whom have complained, and some of whom just haven't complained because they haven't thought that it was worthwhile.
So, what do you think about the time frame it's taken to get to this point?
Mystifying. I can't understand it. I think that, you know, the board of the UFBA really have very important questions to answer about why, you know, today the investigation should start when, to the best of my knowledge, nothing's changed as far as they're concerned for several years, other than the fact that the media have taken an interest. So
is that why you think they're acting, that the pressure's going on them publicly, so they've got no choice?
I don't know. I mean, as far as I'm aware, no new evidence is, well, I'm not aware of anything that's changed. So that seems to be the case. But, you know, who knows? Perhaps they have other information that hasn't come out yet.
So just in terms of these complaints and the timing of them, they, as far as I understand, predate Bill Butzbach being appointed as the Chief Executive of the Firefighters Association. I mean, how did that happen with unresolved issues and complaints sitting there?
Well, I haven't been closely involved, but, you know, I think if that's true, yeah, absolutely, there's some very strange processes happen there and some deep questions that need to be asked.
So what do you think about the overall leadership being shown here?
Well, hopefully it's improving. There's been some really, I don't know, there's been almost like a blindness to this. It's been there, but it hasn't actually been resolved. And, you know, I think volunteer firefighters need better. They really do. Just, you know, we're not, I think, a group of people where this is something that happens more than other groups of people, but the resolution of these issues just seems to be take forever and not lead to justice a lot of the time somehow. It's just not working right. And for this to be happening in the organisation that we rely on to provide advocacy for the rest of us, should we find ourselves in a position like that, is really troubling. And you know, obviously it needs to change.
Do you think things would have unfolded differently if the complainants were not volunteers, if they were professional firefighters? Do you think they've been treated in any way differently as a consequence of that?
Well, I think if they were career firefighters, they would have had different advocates in the NZPFU. I think that the UFBA is quite cautious as an advocate traditionally and quite quiet and you know, finds itself not very willing to publicly confront its self-funder, the fire fens, and, you know, therefore perhaps isn't that effective as an advocate for volunteers who have really serious problems.
So what, they don't want to wade into it? Is it a culture problem?
I think it is a culture problem, yeah, not just with the organisation, not just with the UFBA, but, you know, perhaps within the culture generally. You know, volunteer brigades tend to be in really little towns, scattered all around the country. It's like New Zealand from a number of years ago in some brigades. You know, not most brigades. Most firefighters and most brigades are positive places and good places. And, you know, most firefighters have a really positive experience and aren't involved in anything like this, but too many are. And just the process of resolving it is not satisfactory. It's clearly not working properly. We need strong advocacy when we have these problems.
So what does FENZ, Fire and Emergency New Zealand, need to do to regain the confidence of firefighters, do you think?
Well, I think, the resourcing has really increased in recent times, which is great, and I think that the will is there, but it just hasn't had the impact that it needs to have on the front line. And this particular organisation, well, obviously is rather compromised in terms of making a really strong stand on this issue for the reasons that have become apparent today. It needs to change that. I think volunteer firefighters need to have access to independent advocacy from whoever they choose. They're in a vulnerable position. They do this dangerous, big commitment for their communities for no remuneration. In the unfortunate rare event when they end up subject to something like this happening, they really need to be able to choose who will represent them and to have confidence that they'll be strongly and aggressively advocated for.
Appreciate your time tonight, Tony. That is Tony Sartorius, who is a senior firefighter with 22 years' experience. He's also the founder of Vollynet, which is the largest online community for volunteer firefighters.